Thousands of people walked into the January LSAT with a reasonable expectation, and then they opened up reading comprehension and realized that their expectations were wrong. Imagine that you sit down for the test, you open up reading comp, you do a quick scan of the four passages, and you realize that something is missing. There is no dual or comparative passage. No passage A, no passage B, no paired comparative set, just four single passages. And you start freaking out, wondering if you missed something. And that split second of panic matters more than most people realize, because in that moment, the LSAT isn't really testing your reading ability, it's testing how you respond when your expectations break under time pressure and the knowledge of knowing that it's the real thing. And this sort of panic isn't because the content of the exam is hard or because the questions are tricky. It's because reality did not match your expectations. Your brain wasn't asking, what's the author's main point? It's asking, is the test broken? Did LSAC screw up? Did they make a mistake? And that single question can, of course, spike your adrenaline. And that could be enough to hurt you later. It's like a psychological ambush triggered before you read a single sentence. Now, the reason this might have felt so jarring for January LSAT test takers is because until yesterday or this morning, LSAC's own website explicitly stated that every single reading comp section includes a set of dual comparative passages. Explicitly, they say every single section. That was their official definition of the section. But since I checked yesterday afternoon, that language has now been changed. But of course, January LSAT test takers are not obsessively checking LSAC's website every hour on the hour. And so they walked into the exam with an expectation that LSAC itself had reinforced for years, going back to the June 2007 LSAT, when LSAC first introduced the dual comparative passages. And so LSAC has since yesterday confirmed that some scored reading comp sections will now include a comparative passage, but some will not. That is the change. They have confirmed this will be the case going forward. Of course, you're not going to know which version you're going to get before the exam starts. That is how the LSAT works now. Now, these four single passages are not old pre-2007 reading comp sections being reused. This is modern LSAT material, just reassembled or arranged differently. Now, here's why this might have rattled people who actually studied seriously. LSAT prep trains pattern recognition. That is how the test works. Over time, the structure of the exam becomes automatic. You don't consciously think to yourself, one passage is going to be comparative. You just feel it and you expect it. You budget your time to account for it. And so when that expected structure disappears, your brain doesn't smoothly adapt. It stalls, it sputters out, and that happens before you read a single sentence. Now, the real trap of the LSAT changing things unexpectedly without warning is hesitation. Because in that moment, there are two versions of the same test taker. One version's asking, did I skip something? Is there another screen? Should I flag this? Should I ask the proctor if there was a mistake? But the other test taker is already just moving forward, not losing any precious time, because every minute, every second matters on the LSAT. And when you face uncertainty and you don't know what to do, you lose time as a result. Now, I want to share with you the one test day rule that solves this entire problem. And it's simpler than most people expect. Going forward, now that you're aware of the change, on test day, you do one fast structural scan of the reading comp section, just to confirm what's there. If it's 4 single passages or 3 singles and 1 dual or comparative set. That way, you don't search for anything that isn't coming. You're not arguing with the test. This will protect your focus, because the truth is that, of course, your reading comp approach should never depend on the type of passage that you're dealing with. Whether it's single or comparative, your core job will always remain the same. What's the author doing? How is the passage organized? Which viewpoints matter? And where does the author stand? Those questions never change. Now, I want you to be very clear about what not to do when something unexpected shows up on test day. First, I want you to avoid rereading the instructions because if something actually were wrong, rereading wouldn't fix it. All it's going to do is burn valuable time and cause you doubt. Second, don't search for missing screens. There isn't another page loading. There isn't some hidden passage coming. Looking for something that isn't there just keeps you stuck in the uncertainty. And third, don't mentally renegotiate the test. Don't argue with it. Don't replay what you thought would happen. Don't tell yourself this isn't fair. None of that matters. None of that's going to help. That conversation, that kind of arguing costs you valuable focus and you're never going to get it back. And finally, don't burn time trying to confirm anything. Confirmation is a luxury that you do not have on a timed exam like the LSAT. The rule here is simple. If the section loads cleanly, the test is good. Your job is not to verify the test. Your job is just to take it and solve the questions. Every second that you spent doubting the setup is a second that you're not earning points. Now, there is a benefit to the recent LSAT change despite the uncertainty they've caused, because for many students, 4 single passages is actually easier than dealing with dual or comparative passages. The comparative ones are often slower. You've got more viewpoints to navigate, more to synthesize, more mental overhead. And even strong readers spend extra time just getting oriented. So if the comparative passages usually drain you, this version of reading comp might actually help if you don't sabotage yourself with all the self-doubt. So anytime a passage presents competing explanations, historical shifts, or academic debates, you're still doing comparative reasoning even within a single passage. Now, what the LSAT is really testing with these recent changes is part of a bigger pattern. The LSAT went digital in 2019. They removed logic games in 2024. There have been a couple format changes since the pandemic, and now we're seeing more silent format shifts like this one this week. And each time the LSAT changes, people feel blindsided, and that's understandable. But the underlying content of the exam hasn't really changed. You could say the entire LSAT is a test of reading comprehension and pattern recognition. And the modern LSAT going into 2026 increasingly rewards adaptability under uncertainty. Those who score the highest on the LSAT aren't those who get the test they planned for, they're the people who handle the test they're given. They adjust to the uncertainty in all the recent LSAT changes. And so the reframe I want you to take away with you is that this uncertainty was not an accident. Uncertainty itself is part of the test now. And so if you open reading comp and there's no comparative passage, your mindset is simple. Nothing's missing, nothing's broken. This might actually be an opportunity because while everybody else is burning time second guessing the section, you're already reading. Your comm could be a competitive advantage. Now, to that point, one important thing to understand is that this disruption, this change unannounced, did not affect everybody equally. Beginners were actually the least affected because if you're new to the LSAT, you don't have the right expectations yet. You're still reading passages one at a time, you're still figuring things out. And so when something looks different, you might not even be aware that there is a change. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have elite scorers who are aware of what to expect, but they're still able to adapt quickly. They notice the change, they register it, they say, that's interesting, and then they move on. Their focus is tied to execution, not any particular format. So the group that is actually hit the hardest sits in the middle, roughly the 165 to 170 range, because these are strong test takers, they've studied seriously, they've built the habits, and they've internalized the timing patterns and the section structure. And that's exactly why this kind of surprise is dangerous for them. These mid-high scorers rely heavily on procedural comfort. They know what the section is supposed to look like, and that comfort can turn into rigidity when they're not able to adapt to a sudden change. Because the mental script they've been running no longer matches reality. And so That's the reason why two students with the same reading ability can walk out with different scores. The difference is how quickly they're able to adapt to let go of the plan and deal with the test in front of them. And the ability to deal with uncertainty to navigate the changes, that actually relates to law school and what you do as an attorney. Because in law, the facts don't change because you prepared for a different version of the case. The case you get is the case you argue, and that is the skill being tested on the LSAT today. Not whether you can execute some perfect, planned out plan, but whether you can let go of the plan when reality refuses to cooperate with what you planned. Law school works the same way. Cold calls are unexpected. They don't follow your outline. Exam fact patterns don't match your study guide. Professors will introduce twists on purpose. And strong students don't freeze, they adjust. And so when reading comp looks different from what you expected, the test is asking, can you work with what's in front of you calmly under pressure? Now, a lot of folks have been asking me why LSAC might have chosen not to announce the recent change to reading comprehension, because LSAC could have easily made a big announcement like they did back in 2007 when the dual passages were first announced. LSAC could have said a couple months ago that going forward, some reading comprehension sections may not include a comparative dual passage. Just one sentence sent in an email or even a tweet would have been enough. Instead, they chose to say nothing, which I think was not the right move, but they're going to do what they're going to do. And we don't have any official explanation for why they failed to make an announcement, but we can talk about incentives. And there are two big ones I've got on my mind this week. The first possibility is that they wanted to reduce score inflation without increasing the difficulty level of the test's content, because LSAT score inflation has been a real issue over the past couple of years. More high scores, LSAT medians rising, more pressure on law schools to differentiate applicants. And LSAC has a strong incentive to preserve score spread without officially making the test harder. And so quietly changing the format of the test without announcing that change in advance does exactly that, because on paper, nothing's changing. The scoring is the same. The content is the same. They're not increasing the difficulty level of the questions or the passages, but they are introducing uncertainty. And uncertainty does not affect everybody equally. It hits students the hardest who follow rigid strategies, and their comfort depends on predictability. And so that change alone, introducing uncertainty, could quietly pull scores back toward the middle of the distribution. So what they're measuring is raw adaptability under pressure. The second big possibility here is that LSAC was looking to introduce curveballs due to the recent LSAT cheating scandals. Over the past few years, LSAC has dealt with serious exam integrity issues, including organized efforts to exploit leaked material from LSAT cheating rings in China. And when the LSAT becomes too stable, due to reuse of previously administered exam content that has since been leaked, the test is now easier to game. And changing the exam format without pre-announcing it solves that problem, because the leaked material is not as useful if it no longer replicates the reused exams that LSAC is administering. That, again, doesn't require any harder questions, just introducing more unpredictability. And of course, this doesn't mean that LSAC is trying to trick anybody except maybe the cheaters. And it doesn't mean they were targeting January LSAT test takers in particular. It's just the incentives here. LSAC discontinued LSAT testing in mainland China after the October 2025 LSAT. January would have been the first LSAT administration in China, but of course they're not doing it there anymore. And they want to make sure they preserve the integrity of the test for anyone who might be trying to cheat outside of mainland China. Again, this is just incentives here. LSAC might be moving toward a test where structure is less guaranteed and flexibility matters more. And whether it's about score inflation, test security, or both, the result is the same. LSAC is increasingly testing how you are able to perform when the plan changes. And the good news is that you don't need to guess LSAC's motives to prepare correctly. You've just got to accept the new reality. LSAC may and likely will make changes again without announcing them in advance. They might slightly vary the structure of the exam, and there's no certainty about what the exact format will look like. And so the advantage here now goes to students who see what's in front of them and are able to adjust.